on the edit, so I will restart this. I've got with me John McNamara, who's a technical communicator from IBM, part of the series that we're doing for the Institute of Scientific and Technical Communicators, the ISTC, which is the professional body in the UK for technical communicators. Talking to different technical communicators and understanding what they do and the roles within their organisations. So, John, thank you for your time.
It's a real pleasure.
Thank you. We've done one interview with one IBMer already, Adrian Warman. IBM's a huge company, so it would be useful to understand the part of IBM that you work from and what they do.
Yeah, sure. So, so IBM is a big thought leadership company. Business solutions, technical solutions, software, hardware, services. My patch really is in the messaging space, so I look after all the information around our messaging products, which are many and varied with lots of different types of audiences. So I work fairly and squarely in the messaging space, and sometimes branch out into integration as well.
So by messaging, that's email, instant messages, text messaging, SMS, that type of thing?
It can be, but it can start right over at the enterprise level with things like messaging for mainframe environments, enterprise messaging, to make sure that all of your banking and your insurance infrastructure have got a good high availability for their messages. The messages aren't lost. All the way to app development for developers wanting to create quick and effective, efficient applications for their apps they want to sell on Android on the Android marketplace or YouTube or Google.
Okay, and your role within IBM, what's your role and the aspect with regards to documentation and user assistance?
Right, so I think I've got probably one of the best jobs in IBM, to be honest. I'm very, very fortunate. My role kind of spans a number of things. I'm one of the senior inventors in Hursley, and also as well, I look after the information, not just the traditional information in terms of, say, info centres and knowledge centres, but also expanding out from that as well. So we encompass the whole information experience from social media, informal blogs, video, new media, podcasts, animations, the full work. So right from when somebody is online looking to explore and trying to perform information discovery about a particular product, all the way through to the other end where you've got a developer attempting to create a solution for a problem that they've got and helping them implement it.
So from that, you mentioned a couple of audiences. It might be useful just to understand who they are. So you're writing to help end users and developers and anyone else?
Yeah, so there's what we try and do is create joined up information right from the very high level all the way down to the low level, very, very technical information. And so that if you see something that says where there's a developer talking about one of their products, they say, oh, it'll do these 5 wonderful things for you. We need to make sure that those 5 wonderful things can be traced all the way through that conversation, all the way through our information, so that when somebody else tries to do it, they can actually implement what they've been told. So we'll start off with, say for example, we might have business-focused users wanting to understand the technical marketplace, and probably a good example of that might be IoT, so the Internet of Things, where there's a lot of business opportunities, but because it's a kind of an interesting space, they need to get their head around the high-level overview of what that actually is and what that means to their business, all the way through down to, say, the architectural level, where they're more interested in things like patterns and models of architectures, things that are implementable in the IoT space, and then down into the developers and maybe even the hobbyists who, for example, want to connect up their beer making fridge, make sure it's regulated the right temperature with a Raspberry Pi, and we need to make sure that the information is there, which makes it available for them to do that in the quickest and most effective way possible.
Now, IBM's been leading, you mentioned a phrase that we've used in the past, information experience, so rather than just thinking about manuals, a more holistic approach. And I know IBM has got a centre in Atlanta, I think it is, doing design-led documentation. Has this come about and been driven by somebody from the top within IBM, or has this been from individual groups thinking we need to just think about things differently, and from individual groups come to a shared consensus over what they should be doing?
I think it's come from both. It's certainly something that's got a lot of support at the higher echelons of IBM. We've got a guy called Phil Gilbert who runs it, and he runs a design center over in Austin, in Texas, which is a fantastic place for it. Just the right mix for design organization. But at the same time as well, it's come about because of people in the field saying, hey, we need to have more focus in this area. So you've kind of got a nice need working bottom up and some support coming top down as well. So it's kind of a marriage of both, really. The need's been there and it's been supported by management, which is really good.
Yeah, and you mentioned, my next question was about the types of content, and you've mentioned those video and blogs and classic online knowledge centers, among some of them that you mentioned. How do you decide what should be explained via video, or what should be explained in text, in short form, in long form, in pictures? How do you decide which medium, how to package up the information that's needed?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and it's not an immediately obvious one to answer. So my background is I used to be a consultant in messaging and integration and BPM space, which meant me traveling around all over the place, talking to customers who want to try and solve problems and create solutions with technical products. And even though the products could be different, you saw the same type of behavior over and over again. So me being, at the time, a young, keen consultant, I would get the brief by email, and I'd probably jump to a conclusion and say, oh, I know what they need. I'd run in, and my first instinct would go straight on to the machines, like, yeah, you want this, yeah, let me show you. But actually, as I soon came to discover, that's not really what these people wanted. What they wanted initially was to walk in and have a conversation. They wanted to understand at a high level the value proposition of what you were providing, what it could do for them, the benefits of it, and maybe some of the things that to keep in mind in the implementation. And from that, they would come to a conclusion as to whether or not they would want to proceed with your idea or with your product. And from that, they then say, well, okay, fair enough, you've spoken to me about this, you told me about it, I kind of get it, now show me how this works. And so you would then pop onto the machine, you would demonstrate it, you'd walk them through the technology, you might provide some skills transfer as well. And then after that, they would say, well, okay, fine, we understand it, great, now once you leave, I need to be able to contact you if I've got any questions about maybe I'm doing something slightly differently in a different platform. I need to be able to contact you. As a consultant, that's absolutely fine. That's exactly what you do. And what I've tried to do here is to take the information model and, as far as possible, make it fit with that consultancy model. And so the podcasts, for example, are a wonderful way of sharing that kind of high-level conversational style that we have. And the nice thing about it is, the feedback that we've had is, because it's a podcast, it can be listened to on the way into work or on the commute, which you can't do with video and you can't do with text. And so the podcast works wonderfully well for that. And then for the demonstration, you then come into maybe high-level video, showing at a high level what you're going to be doing. That's then backed up with strong technical documentation. So when they're moving out of those tangents showing the video, they've got good support there as well, and they can plan a bit deeper. And finally, we will then use social media for that kind of callback. So when they say, well, actually, I'm doing it in this particular way, and it's not entirely clear to me if it's the right thing to do, they can pop onto Twitter, they can pop onto one of our blogs and say, hey, look, I'm doing this. Do you have any advice? And that can be supported either by us, the technical writers, or the development team, or indeed other people outside of IBM who are also using that technology as well. So that's kind of how it fits in for us anyway.
you're stringing together the pre-sales with you're stringing together the information where somebody is a prospect to a beginner to an advanced user, and making that part of a continuous. I mean, I won't use the word customer journey. A continuous stream, as it were, from being a tourist in a city to being a shopper in a city.
Yeah, the one of the things that always occurred to me, if I was working with a brand new piece of technology I'd never worked with before, and there was significant pressure to make it work for a customer, the one thing that would always jump at me is like, God, I wish there was somebody online I could just talk to about this right now. If there was a community I could just chat to, and that's the kind of support we want to provide with our information, not just have it static, but to have a feedback and a relationship with our information, and that comes right through our Google Hangouts and our social media presence. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We try and lead the user right from the initial information discovery to making a decision about how best to implement the technology, to showing them how to do it, and then providing them with information support at the end of it, in the same way that like a consultant might if they went on site to visit them.
So what? And this is a challenge. Job titles do tend to pigeonhole people into defining what they don't do as much as what they do. What job title then do you have, and which department are you in as well?
Yeah, sure. So I work in a department called UTD, User Technology Design, and in that my role is I've got two. I'm one of the senior inventors in the labs, which has me fiddling around with all sorts of wonderful things, and an information architect. So and I think the architecture of all these little bits of information into a cohesive journey for the user is kind of really what I'm all about.
And what's a typical day like then in those two particular roles? What are the types of things that you'll face from, say, or what would have happened last week or coming up this week? What is there such a thing as a typical day? What common features are there?
Well, I've got it's a tremendously fun job, Ellis. So if I start off, the one thing I'll probably do in the morning when I get in is have a large drink of coffee.
Oh, brandy.
Because nothing starts without that. And I'll probably catch up with one of the product managers from one of the projects I'll be working on, trying to get to grips with what's coming down the pipe in the next few months, so I can start preparing for that. I might then move on to working with our design team. So, for example, working with IoT Foundation, and I'm working with those guys to make sure that our information experience is nicely joined up, and we cater for everyone, right from somebody wanting to implement a massive enterprise solution, right to the hobbyist who wants to crack on with a Raspberry Pi and BeagleBone. So after that, over lunchtime, we'll often have a little open kind of seminar where people who want to get into patents and inventions can just pop in, and we'll throw some ideas together, and we'll start to take that idea and transform it into a bit more of a formal patent application process. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my lunchtime sorted out. And then if I've got a bit of time after that, one of the things I love to get involved in, and that's been really successful, is animations. So we started doing podcasts, which everyone really likes to do because they're really quick, really easy, and really simple. One of the downsides with them is that their reach is limited because they're usually hidden away on various podcast sites or on iTunes. And we thought, well, it'd be fantastic if we could expand the reach of those to YouTube. And so we then overlaid them with animations of our developers. And now, whereas before it was always not a chore, but developers have to be sort of prodded and say, "Oh, come and do a podcast with us." Now we tend to find that people will come on, they'll choose an avatar, and once they have their cartoon of them talking about whatever it is they're talking about, they'll share that with their friends and family, and it's a really nice, rewarding experience. It still has that level of anonymity for the developer because not everyone wants to be splashed all over YouTube, but at the same time it gives their voice and I guess almost a relational type expression with the information, so you kind of get a feel for who this person is. So it works really well, and they're kind of knocking the doors down to do that one. So we'll have animation, and then in the afternoon we might move on to, say, a new product and starting to take a look at who the users are and what information repositories they will most likely need. Should the focus be on social? Should the focus be on video? Or should it be more on the technical documentation? So you may find that people who have come from or are used to a more legacy, more traditional product like Kix feel very much at home with a manual and they want to write in the corners and underline stuff, make their own notes. Absolutely valid, and that's a right thing to do. Whereas you might find that over a brand new product that's got developers just learning how to code and want to play, they'll be more interested in things like a Google Hangout. They can see the developers and ask them questions. So it's very much horses for courses, really. So at the end of the day, I'll probably look at a new product and how we can craft the information architecture around it. Oh, and gamification as well. Probably at the end of the day, end with something nice.
Now, a couple of things from what you said there. If people want to listen to the podcasts, and the animated versions, is there a channel for them on YouTube that people can go to see, stroke watch, listen to them?
Yeah, sure. So all of our good stuff messaging is on a YouTube channel called IBM Messaging Media. If you have a quick peek for that on YouTube, you'll come across our channel. You'll see lots of animations, you'll see lots of hangouts, and you'll see lots of technical video on there. And if you do a search for IBM Messaging on iTunes, you'll see us on. Well, you'll hear us on there as well, with a range of podcasts too. So yeah, two good places to go to get more freely available information.
Okay, that's good. I haven't seen those, so I'll that's something I'll do as well. Now, in terms of the writing aspect of what you do and creating content for an external audience, let's say, what attracts you to that? What is it that interests you about the communication aspect of the role that you have?
Yeah, so there's two elements to the writing aspect of it. One is the kind of informal information that we provide, and the other, of course, is the more traditional technical information. So we've got two different levels of style for that, and that I find to be quite interesting. So in our blogs that we create, our developers are very much encouraged to get involved in the creation of that information. The technical writers are there to help to make sure that the information that they provide is as understandable and it portrays their message in the most effective way possible. We don't use like a big stick. It's very much a case like guidance to say, well, look, how are you about doing it this way? The nice thing about that is that every developer has their own style of writing, and so even without knowing who it is, by the first paragraph, you get an insight into the writer that's created that information and the developer, and that's phenomenal. For the technical information and more traditional technical information, I like the fact that it's multi-usable, so it can be used effectively for translation. It's hugely accessible, so people who, for example, are challenged visually can still access it easily. People from all over the world have the same experience with the information, which is excellent, and you know that the right message is being portrayed no matter where you are in the world or whatever difficulties you might encounter in terms of consuming information. And I think that's just massive, and that's the reason why I think we do need this type of information. There's a lot of emphasis on the new social side, and that's all well and good. That's all fantastic, but at the same side, we also need to have that kind of more steadfast traditional information to support everyone as well.
Yeah, in the information design theory, there's a differentiation between short-term information and long-term, and what is interesting is how short-term information is communicated, which is often representing verbal ways we speak, and long-term is more written down, and knowing when to switch from one to the other,
Yeah.
and fusing them in that way. In terms of training, and acquiring the skills to do this, has it been a case of copying from somebody else, just learning by doing, formal training? How have you built up the skills to do this well?
It's a mixture of both, really. So when a new writer comes on board to IBM, they're kind of tested for natural attitude, which is fair enough, because if they're not, typically people don't enjoy things that they're not particularly good at least in the short term. And then once we find people that have got a natural flair for it, there's an internal IBM workshop and course to put the people through, which gives them information methodologies that IBM have constructed, and also an IBM style guidance as well, to make sure that the information that they create is accessible, it's able to be translated properly, and of course, given all that, it's also meaningful and it's concise and provides the right information to the right person. So everyone starts with that, and once they get into that and they find their niche, they may well feel they gravitate towards certain areas. So I tend to very much enjoy the social element of it, the social side, because where I happen to be on the customer science, that's kind of where I saw an awful lot of value, and there was more scope there for me to play around and try out new things. But you'll find writers very much like the hardcore discipline of writing, and they'll gravitate towards that. We've got some fantastic writing professionals doing that, and you'll find people who are very much into the podcasting, the new media side. Got great guys doing that, and ladies doing podcasts, phenomenal. And the social element as well. So there's once they're into it and they've been formally trained, there's a huge remit of stuff they can start to grow and evolve into.
And in terms of standards and methodologies, and IBM have been one of the leading drivers for things like DITA in knowledge-base related documentation. Are there standards and particular tools and methodologies that are used by you that are, as it were, IBM standards or elsewhere, that you adopt in doing any of this, or is it a free hand?
Well, so that is a really, really good question. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, really, because you have this freedom to go and explore new things, and the balance has to be that while you provide a choices for people and they consume information, you need to be also providing a consistent look, feel, and experience. So if they go to messaging, they might well use MQ, but at the same time, they may well use another IBM product. And what you don't want to have happen is for them to have a learning experience of using MQ's information and then start all over again and learn how to use Click's information. So there are standards that we define to make sure that there is a consistent look and feel. But having said that, one thing that's most interesting about it is the external social information framework is something that's shifting all the time, and so there are developers out there who use GitHub, for example, and so we're looking at ways to explore whether GitHub is a good repository of information, who would use it, is it widely accessible to people, is it niche, can we embed it perhaps with a more traditional documentation as well, because we want to provide good, clear information. But what we also like to do as well is to encourage people who are not from IBM to contribute to that information as well. And then where we found that it's been really useful, fold it into the core information repository. So we're trying to blend an awful lot of different things in together, and it's been a real challenge, but it's tremendous fun for sure.
Yes, you mentioned there what's often called user-generated content, and that is an interesting development in because the users are using the product every day, so often they know more about the product than even perhaps the developers at times, and how to get access to their expertise and bring that into in as well. You mentioned something there that's just escaped me. It led to a question. I'm just trying to think what it was. It's escaped me now, I think. Now, thank you for that. I think we've come to the end of the questions, but behind you, sort of not so much the elephant in the room as the comics in the room, covers from 2000 AD. So is that because you are a fan of that type of content, or because you're involved in creating that type of content?
Gosh, wow, that's a phenomenal question. I love comics, mainly 2000 AD, because I'll be honest, it's kind of how I learned to read. I was interested in it, but it was, for me, it didn't really have much of an appeal. But when I started getting a handle on comics, and because of the stories and the narratives, I just fell in love with them, and my literacy went through the roof, in comparison to what it was. And I've been reading 2000 AD since it came out in 1977. Been collecting them, and yeah, some of the ways in which they portray information, such as character-driven, story-driven, strong narrative, are trying to blend into our information as well. And for example, I'm pretty sure that I would never come up with the idea of cartoon animations were it not for the fact that I spent the best part of my life reading comics and seeing what a strong visual way that is of representing technical concepts. Also, I'd say as well, comics, particularly 2000 AD, have very much kind of guided me in my career. My interest in technology is probably stemmed from reading, Sam Slade, Robo Hunter, Judge Dredd, all sorts of wonderful things like which I think, well, maybe in the future we could have these things. Now, how would they come about? And then that stemmed my interest in technology, really. So I owe a lot to 2000 AD and comics.
That's interesting. Google did a comic when they launched Chrome as a user guide, and actually we've got 3 free comics on our website which are primers on technical stuff. There's a different way of explaining what Twitter is, what content strategy is, what technical communicators do, and it is an interesting means. It links back to archetypes and things like the monomyth, where you can have as it were, a hero or a primary actor who goes through and experiences things, and you can use that as a way of explaining, again, back to why you should be, what you were saying earlier about why you should use a particular product or do a particular thing.
Yeah.
Those are the questions I've got. So it's always interesting seeing all the different roles and activities that technical communicators have, and particularly in IBM, there's such diversity there as well. It's very interesting to understand that and learn a little bit about it. Apologies for the cough. So, John, it's been very enjoyable talking to you, and thank you for your time.
It's been a real joy. Thank you very much, Ellis. Take care, buddy.
Thank you.